You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to speak to America's hardworking farmers and food producers. We should know. FLM Harvest is a strategic, full-service creative consultancy proud to reach more farmers, farmer boards, and food and commodity associations than any agency in the country. And we understand omni-channel as well as we understand the journey from field to fork. Most importantly, we connect clients to the audiences that matter to them.
Thank you for joining us today for the Meet the Farm Hands video segment on Agri-Pulse TV. I'm Hannah Pagel, and today I am joined by Michael Dykes, President and CEO of the International Dairy Foods Association. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Hannah.
So why don't we start off I want to get a timeline of your career from the beginning to present day.
I don't know how much time you have, Hannah, but we'll do it. I grew up in southeastern Kentucky, near the Tennessee border. Grew up on a small farm, barley, tobacco, and dairy cows. Started milking cows by hand when I was 5 years old. Mom, Dad, and I milked 15 cows. Okay. Graduated from high school, never intended to go to college. Always wanted to be a truck driver all of my life. I loved anything with a steering wheel on it. So when I graduated from high school, I took a job that summer. And about July, I thought maybe I should think about maybe doing something else. Maybe I should go to college, lo and behold. So I checked with the University of Kentucky, sent in my application, sent my check, and I enrolled in the fall. That's the first time I'd ever been to Lexington, Kentucky, which was 2 hours away from home. Majored in animal science. As a pre-vet student, I wanted to go to veterinary school. I completed my animal science degree. Then I got intrigued by economics and the business side of things. I did a master's in agricultural economics. Then I went at the University of Kentucky. Then I went to Auburn University to veterinary school for 4 years. I knew all along I wanted to be involved in food animal medicine, having grown up on the farm and milking cows. So I left Auburn. I went to Southern Illinois. And joined and purchased into a 6-person, primarily dairy practice. About 90% of our practice was dairy. I spent time on dairy cows, probably 75% of my time, and 25% of my time on hogs. And I love both sides of that. Hogs are much more integrated, much more around the business model and the economic side of things. After about 4 or 5 years of that, I thought maybe I need to do something else. I need to do something different. So I just debated going back to school, doing a PhD program, or joining industry. I decided to join industry. I worked for Continental Grain Company for about 3 years as a technical service veterinarian. Moved to Madison, Wisconsin. I had the geography of everything north of I-80 for both hogs and cows, 13 sales reps. Monsanto was in the process of launching RBST for dairy cows. They wanted to hire someone, so I started with Monsanto in 1989 to work on the field research for RBST, and did that for a few years. Became very political in Wisconsin, Minnesota. I built a coalition of support among veterinarians, extension specialists, dairy leaders. Then I moved to St. Louis and I started working state government relations for not just RBST, but also for the plans to introduce the new GMO crops. So I worked all 50 states. And then as we were applying to the European Union for approval for Roundup Ready soybeans, I was asked to go to Europe and to investigate where we were in the process, what we needed to do to get approval, because things didn't look too good at that time. So I went to Europe for 2 weeks, came back, wrote up an assessment that if we didn't turn some of the countries around, member states around, we weren't going to get approval. Long story short, I spent the next year and a half, came home to St. Louis every other weekend, and I worked all European Union countries with an occasional trip to Argentina on Roundup Ready soybeans and an occasional trip to Brazil on Roundup Ready soybeans. When the vote had ended, we had Roundup Ready soybeans approved, and the 5 countries that were negative at the beginning all voted yes. Finland, Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And Argentina approved rounded ready soybeans. So I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1997 because I needed to get off the airplane. And I worked on Agri-Pulse here. And when I left Monsanto in January of 2016, I was leading the government affairs internationally, and worked the state, local, federal, and international issues, leveraging the U.S. Presence on the international issues. Didn't know what I was going to do when I left Monsanto Company. I explored starting my own lobbying organization, had a couple offers to join other lobbying firms, and the recruiters contacted me about this position at IDFA, and I had known Connie Tipton and I'd known Tip over the years, had worked with him on RBST. So I started here in October of 2016. So I left in January of 2016, started here in October of 2016. And I'm here today, and I love every day of it. It's been a new thing, it's been a new challenge, but I love it. I love the team we're assimilating. I love the members. I love the challenge. And as I think about where I am today with the dairy industry, as I told you, I started milking cows when I was 5 years old. I was a dairy veterinarian for 6 years. I did RBST introduction in this country. And I'm back doing dairy. So I kind of come in and out of dairy my entire career. So I've seen the livestock side, cows, hogs. I've seen the dairy side. I've seen the row crop side. I've seen the domestic policy. I've seen the international policy. I have never done anything in my life other than agriculture.
You've got a grand perspective from all different angles.
I've been doing it for a long time, Hannah. From 5 years old to now, I've been at this about 60 years. So yeah, I've had a lot of time.
That's awesome.
It's been an amazing ride.
I want to go back to your time when you were in Europe. Did you live in the European Union, or for how long were you there? Were you just coming and going?
About a year and a half. I tried to come home every other weekend. I didn't always make it every other weekend. Sometimes it'd be 3 weeks. I had an apartment in Brussels, but I was rarely there.
Okay.
I was hopping to all member states, focusing on those 5, but going to all the others as well.
Okay.
So I basically went to visited every U.S. embassy in every member state, and talked to them about the issues, made sure they had the information, got their questions answered, so forth. So I was on the move at all times.
How does lobbying in the European Union compare to lobbying here in the U.S.?
Well, lobbying in the European Union is not organized, and most of it's done through trade associations, federations, local constituencies, and that's part of what you have to figure out is how can you get your message to the people that matter to them. Mm-hmm. So you work with it. You spend a lot of time working with the various trade associations.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you prefer lobbying back here in the U.S. or in the European Union?
Well, I don't know that I'd say I prefer one over the other. They're just very different. Mm-hmm. One of the things I would say about the European Union, and one of the things I always try to make a point of, and I don't know that those of us who've grown up in agriculture really appreciate it. But when you get outside the U.S., U.S. embassies are a tremendous asset, and especially the Foreign Ag Service. We usually have an agricultural attaché in every embassy that knows the local government, knows the local constituents. They're extremely helpful. They're there to advocate on behalf of American agriculture. So they are an integral part of anything you do once you leave the U.S. Mm-hmm. So I often find that when I do presentations to producer audiences in the U.S., they're not really aware of all the benefits of our U.S. embassies abroad. Mm-hmm. So that's probably one of the big differences. And domestically, you don't use the embassies, obviously, but when you leave the U.S., they become a critical part of what you do.
What would you say your favorite experience was working as Vice President of Government Affairs for Monsanto? Do you have like a favorite story or memory?
Oh, geez, I have so many memories. Probably one of the things that stands out to most to me, Hannah, is I think about the introduction of RBST, trying to find some place that would take the farmer's milk. We had 6 of the highest producing herds in Wisconsin identified. They were doing all the things known at that time to increase milk production. And they were excited to try RBST, but we couldn't find a place that would take the milk to process the milk because it was such a controversial topic in Wisconsin at the time. So I went across the border, about 8 miles south of the Wisconsin border in Illinois, and I remember talking to the Kuster family, Joel and Linnea Kuster. They were milking cows in a stanchion barn, farming corn and beans. We're very excited about technology and what technology could do, but they were going to exit the dairy business, but they agreed to do the trial for me, with Monsanto. And then once the trial's over, they'd leave the business. Unless they've left recently, when the trial ended, they were working with a nutritionist. They built a freestall barn. They built a new parlor, and I think they were milking 300 cows when I last talked to them. So just seeing and knowing what a difference that made to the family, what wonderful people they were, and the number of times they hosted tours at the farm to see the cows, the number of times they presented and testified in state legislatures as to how it worked and what it did and what their experience was just an absolutely tremendous experience. That is one I'll never forget. Mm-hmm. I think about Europe and I think about the people in the embassies and the many times that we had, and all the extra efforts that people went into to try to get accurate information to the European member states that were trying to decide about Roundup Ready soybeans. Absolutely phenomenal, and some of those people, I'll never, ever forget them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those are some of my favorite memories.
Great. So you started your career milking at age 5, and now you're president and CEO of IDFA. How has the dairy industry changed from you as a little 5-year-old to now?
Well, 2 things. I don't think anybody's milking by hand anymore. I hope not. We even upgraded when I was in high school. Before I graduated, we upgraded. We actually got a single unit DeLaval milker, and we thought we had, we couldn't believe how it had changed things. And we were selling grade B milk, grade C milk to make cheese with. You know, the level of sophistication, the amount of technology on today's farms, it's just absolutely tremendous. If we think about what our dairy industry's done, and my hat's off to those families that are dairy producers. It's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's a tremendous amount of effort and dedication. I tell people today, if you haven't been on a farm in the last 5 years, you really don't know what's happening on today's farms. You think about the precision agriculture and the amount of technology, you think about what the internet has done, the record keeping has done. It is absolutely phenomenal. We look at what's happened with milk production. We've decreased the number of farms. We've kept the cow herd relatively stable at about 9 million head, yet we've increased milk production. We're over 23,000 pounds per cow per year. Today. It's phenomenal what we've done with efficiency on the dairy farm. And you could say the same thing about row crops, corn, soy. It's just absolutely phenomenal what we're able to do in agriculture. And I tell everyone the productive capacity of American agriculture is unparalleled anywhere in the world. Another thing that I often think about is people ask about farmers in different parts of the world. I have been to the corn contest in China. I have been to Mario Maggi's farm in Brazil and Mato Grosso, the world's largest soybean grower. Farmers are very, very similar all around the world. They want much the same things. Give us a level playing field. Give us the tools we need to produce. Allow us to compete on a level playing field. and they're all dedicated to what they're trying to do. There's a lot of similarities around the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, June is Dairy Month.
Dairy Month.
It is. And so I want to know what the president and CEO of IDFA's favorite dairy product is.
Favorite dairy product? That might be, I love ice cream, but I probably eat more cheese than I eat ice cream. I love milk. I try to have milk for breakfast. That's one of my favorite things, cold milk. So probably cheese is that's probably the thing I consume the most of.
Mm-hmm.
I love cheese.
Now, going to the milk, are you a whole milk, 2%, 1%,
I
skim?
usually drink 2%.
2%?
2% is usually my drink of choice.
Mm-hmm. So throughout your time in your career, you said you traveled a lot and then you wanted to come back to kind of just set your roots here. Any particular place that you love to go to, whether it was for work or for leisure travel, but what would you say your favorite place to go visit was?
Well, if I had to pick one place in the world, probably Italy would be my favorite place to go. Italy is an unbelievably unorganized, unstructured place to try to lobby.
Okay.
It is a totally different place. It's a beautiful country. People are wonderful. Italy's my favorite place.
Mm-hmm.
I love mozzarella cheese and tomatoes. Outstanding wine. There's just so many good things about Italy.
Was there ever a language barrier when you were trying to communicate?
Well, as you can tell by my accent, is I tell you where I grew up in southeastern Kentucky. My dad couldn't read or write. My mom had an 8th grade education. So people that know me well would always ask me, so Dykes, how many languages do you speak? And some who knew me well would often speak up and say, well, Dykes doesn't speak any language. He doesn't even speak English very well. So I did quite well. I managed to, I could have taxi language in most of those countries because I was there all the time. But did I learn how to conduct business in Finnish or Italian or Greek or no?
Mm-hmm.
But I had local people that would help. The embassy is very helpful for that, and we had salespeople and scientific people spread around the country. So I had a local with me that would help with the language.
You had a resource.
I had a resource, or
Good.
I found a resource.
That's resourceful.
There you gotta be resourceful. Yeah.
So with everything you are responsible in the position you are today and everything that's going on in the dairy industry, what keeps you up at night in terms of...
Well, there aren't too many things that keep me up at night, Hannah. I have never had any problem sleeping. We're in a tough time in agriculture, whether that be dairy, whether that be corn, whether that be soy, whether that be cotton, whether that be pork beef. Between the weather, between the prices, trade issues, this is a tough time for American agriculture and has been a tough time for 4 or 5 years. I want to see these kind of times turn around. I know how hard people work on the farm. I've been there. I've done that. So I want to see those kind of times turn around. I'm often asked, I don't think we are to the place economically we were in 1986 and 1987, especially in dairy. I don't think our farms are nearly as leveraged from a debt perspective as they were then. But for those of us who've been in agriculture for several years, we know the thing has peaks and valleys, and we're kind of down in the peak. I mean, we're down in the valley now, but I'm a firm believer, good times, better times will return, and we'll be back to a more profitable situation. I have no doubt about that, and I think the basic premise for that is the things we're producing. Food. People are going to eat food around the world,
mm-hmm.
and we're going to have more people. We're going to have more mouths to feed. So there's going to be a need for the things that American agriculture produces. And given that there's going to be demand, no one can outcompete the American producer, American agriculture, agribusiness producers, the whole entire chain. No one can outproduce us and outcompete us if we have a level playing field. So for those reasons, Hannah, I am optimistic about the future. I realize where we are today, but I'm optimistic about our future.
What would you like to see for the future?
If I could wave a magic wand today, my first thing would be trade agreements. We need trade agreements. And I come back to the basics. 95% of the world's consumers are going to reside outside the U.S. borders. No one can produce like American agriculture. So in order to get the things we produce to the people who want to purchase it, we're going to have trade agreements. And we need access, and we need a level playing field. So I would be working on getting USMCA ratified, which I am. I would be working on getting an agreement with Japan that was as good as the EU has or the CPTPP is. I would be trying to finalize the 301 actions and get an agreement with China. China has the potential to be a $23 billion market for dairy in 10 years. I always tell people anything that has to deal with China, anything you do there, when you multiply times 1.5 billion people, it's a big number. So I would be working on that, and then I'd be camped out in countries of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and on and on and on, with trade agreements. And I think if we think about the long-term future for American agriculture, that's where it is. We have to have trade.
Okay.
Africa, I believe Africa holds potential. I think it will be a while. The next thing we need to see in Africa is economic development. And I'm a believer that we would see an abundance of food in Africa tomorrow if there is economic development in Africa. So I think that will happen at some point in time, and we need to be in a position that we're ready for that.
Okay. So I kind of want to get to know a little bit about what do you like to do outside of advocating for agriculture? Do you have any hobbies or anything that you just like to put work down and just go relax?
Well, if I relax, that's probably, I like to hunt. I like to go quail hunting, especially in Southwest Georgia. I like to go pheasant hunting, especially in South Dakota. I like to spend time with family. I have a place on the lake in southeastern Kentucky, Lake Cumberland. I love to be out on the lake in a boat, enjoy that. I am very much an extrovert. So anytime I'm around somebody else, I'm probably happy. I never like to be alone. Love to be with my family. I don't have too many other hobbies. I don't really play golf unless I have to. For some political fundraiser, I'll play golf. But otherwise, I don't play. Love to play pool. That's about it. And I love to work.
Okay.
I love to work.
Work hard, play hard.
Work hard, play hard. Work hard, play to win.
There you go. There you go. So throughout your career, you've been around many people. You said you don't like to be alone at all. So have you come across anyone who's been like a really good mentor to you, or somebody who sticks out that's helped lead you into the position you are today?
Yeah, I would say probably I can think of probably three people that stand out to me. First would be my grandfather. My grandfather had a tremendous work ethic. He would never leave until it's done, and had to be done well. Believed in education. Another person would be a veterinarian that I worked for when I was an undergraduate, applying to veterinary school, Dr. Tom Swerzik. I was a pathologist. I had utmost respect for him. Gave me lots of responsibilities. Believed in me, maybe at times when I didn't always believe in myself, and gave me encouragement that keep going. Another one was a dairy client of mine, Waldo Kalbach at Registered Holsteins. Just a phenomenal guy. I can't say enough about him and the encouragement he gave me. You know, those are three that come to mind, but God, I could list 300, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
But those are three that I would say, if I reflect on it and think about it, those are three that come top to mind very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up today, I want to ask if you could go back to day one, you know, young Michael, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself, or what advice would you give yourself?
You know, Hannah, I've been asked that question before, and I get asked that question when I interview young people about jobs and so forth, or if I talk to young people, and sometimes I hear regrets. And I wouldn't change one thing. Not one thing would I change. I tell my kids this thing called life. I have 2 children. I tell my kids this thing called life's not easy. You can't plan this thing out too well. If you get too scripted, you'll miss opportunities. When I was a kid, having graduated from high school, had a job, I had a little money in my pocket, never thought I'd go to college. After I got out of college, I never ever dreamed I'd ever be in Europe or China or Brazil or Argentina. Never dreamed I'd be in Washington, D.C. Never dreamed I'd be a lobbyist. Never had any desire to be, because I didn't know what those roles were. Didn't know those roles would ever be open to me. So I believe life's kind of like a river. You got to float down it. You'll have crooks and turns. You might get dumped out of the boat occasionally, but you can never ever stop pursuing the next thing and looking for the next challenge. And if you have that kind of attitude, surround yourself with good people that are willing to help you. I'm a believer most anything you want to do is possible. But you don't always know today what you might want to do 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Michael Dykes, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're the best. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for interviewing.